I'm Vicki Sherman, your host at the FAA Aviation Safety Center on the Sun and Fun Complex at Lakeland, Florida, coming to you live from the 2014 Sun and Fun Fly-In. For over 16 years, we have been bringing the aviation safety message to you via seminars, workshops, and videos using our aviation safety team representatives, which means our production crew is made up almost entirely of volunteers giving their time to support aviation safety. After today's presentation, please take a few minutes to thank our stage, floor, and camera crew for their time and efforts as the FAA is closing the FAA Safety Center at the end of Sun and Fun and will no longer be providing aviation safety outreach here. Our next presenter, his aviation career at the age of 12, cutting grass, the local airport, working his way up. He worked for NASA on the Apollo 11 moon landing, was a system designer on the SR-71 U-2, Apollo 17, and Space Shuttle program. He is an ATP private pilot, he is an ATP rated pilot and has over 14,000 flight hours. He's been with the FAA Air Safety Investigator since 1987 and is currently on Washington, D.C. GO team, having worked over 1,000 accidents and incidents. His topic today is analysis of general aviation accidents. Let's welcome Tony James.
Thank you for the kind words. I really appreciate being here, and you know, I've been in this business a long time. And as the young lady said, I started when I was in the age of 12, and my first job was cleaning the lights around the airport, the taxiway lights, the runway lights, and then I got the duty to start cleaning honey buckets. Most people have no idea what honey buckets are, but those were in the back of a DC-3. That was the local restrooms back there. But anyway, that's how I started my business, and I've been with the FAA for a long time. I'm getting ready to call it quits here real soon. But anyways, it is such a great pleasure to be here, and I appreciate the FAASTeam for inviting me down. This is a kind of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to do this. Every time I come down here, I have this energy of wanting to see people and talk to them and tell them about the real world of accident investigation. This is not something that everybody would want to do. Not everybody has the hankering to do this, but this is something I've always wanted to do. And I've been on the GO team now for 17 years, and I have worked basically every one of the major accidents for the past 17 years. I just finished up the Asiani accident in San Francisco on the 777, and of course I'm working on the Malaysia accident, and I'll tell you all I know about it real quick, so just listen. Okay, I took care of that. We have not a clue where that airplane is, nor we don't know what it is. In fact, I brought my guys back out of Malaysia last week, so we have no FAA participation whatsoever. But again, my name is Tony James. I'm a senior air safety investigator, and I do mean senior. I'm the oldest one in the office, and I am on the GO team, the senior member of the GO team. When we talk about accident investigation, I'm not here to teach you how to do an accident investigation. I'm here to show you some of the nonsense that I've been involved in. When I say nonsense, you would not believe when you go out to an accident and you say, oh, it's just an accident. Well, let me tell you, there's a lot of things that goes into an accident. It's how you take care of yourself. And let's start off with the first thing where it says have a plan. Well, when you do this for a year or 2 or 3 or 4 years, you already have a plan right here. And no plan is ever the same. No plan is ever the same because it always, where you're in mountainous, you're in the rivers, in the jungles. I did a mid-air down in Brazil where a 737 ran into a legacy jet at flight level 370. I spent 2 weeks, about 10 days, I guess, in the jungle, in the Amazon jungle. It was quite an intriguing deal between the panthers and the snakes. It was, you learn to adapt to a lot of things. And I've got one presentation I'm going to show you about getting trapped on top of a mountain in Alaska. You've got to be able to organize. Well, you listen to me talk, you say, how can the boy talk like that, ever organize anything? Well, I'm from the mountains of North Carolina. I was raised down there, and I was born at the Biltmore Estate in the town of Biltmore, North Carolina. And that's where I come from. And my heritage comes from that. And I've traveled all over the world, but I have not tried to keep my southern accent. It has just stayed with me. And that, you know, that's me, and what you see is what you get. I'm about as plain vanilla comes. The next thing is to conduct the investigation. When we go to do an investigation, we normally travel with the National Transportation Safety Board. The way this works, the FAA has nine areas of responsibilities that we're responsible for. The NTSB's responsibility is to conduct the final analysis of it and present the cause of the accident. That's their main objective. But we travel with the NTSB a lot. I don't travel with the regional guys very much. I travel with the GO team out of Washington. And normally we travel as a group of about 25 to 30 people. And once we get there, we assemble, on the FAA side of it, I will have as many as 25 or 30 FAA people on site that reports to me. It's quite a goat rope sometimes, and it looks like, how does all this come together? But you've got to have a plan, you've got to organize it, and you've got to put it together. When you conduct the investigation, you know, when I teach accident investigation, I say, okay, what do you look for? You've got to go in there with a wide view of everything. You take a view of everything and do not draw conclusions on anything. Then as the time goes by, you narrow it down until you have something to focus on. And then that's what you need to lead into. And then you conclude the investigation, and then you write your report up. We work with the NTSB as far as the autopsy stuff, the information that we get from our CAMI people in Oklahoma City, the Blue Ribbon packages, which are the records of the pilots, both medical, the airplane history, and the pilot certificates we get for the board. As you can see, we work very closely with the NTSB. It's like brothers in arms. We're there for the same thing, and that's the flying public. We're there to protect the flying public. If we have an issue with an airplane, we have the responsibility to fix that problem down, and we try our very best to do that. Whenever we go to an accident investigation, the first thing is your personal safety. You have to be really careful because there's sharp objects around you. It's slippery. It's slimy. It is just sometimes not the best place you'd want to go to, because they normally don't just crash in the middle of an airport with a Holiday Inn right there, you know, the Hilton or whatever. It's always out in the middle of the boondocks. And you've got to be really careful. If you look at my shot record, it looks like a who's who, you know, because I travel worldwide for the FAA. The next thing is something most people don't like to talk about, but it's the HR. That's the human remains removal. When we get there, normally the bodies are still in the airplane. Some of them are really, really bad shape, and some of them are not bad shape at all. But we wait for the coroner to come in and remove the bodies. But even working inside the airplanes, the HR is always part of it. I hate to talk about it, but that's really part of what we do and how we do it. The next thing is the examination of the wreckage. When we go to an accident site, along with the NTSB, there is usually a manufacturer representative there, like Piper, Cessna, Beechcraft, and an engine representative where it's a turbine-powered or piston-powered engines. We usually have a representative there. The Flight Standards Office usually sends, the FAA Flight Standards usually sends two people, normally a maintenance individual and a operations type of pilot. So that's usually, for a small airplane accident, that's what we have on scene. And that's the people that actually do the work. And they work as a team. Everybody takes care of everybody. It's always, you know, you watch for this person, you watch for that person, and make sure that nobody gets hurt. And if anybody gets cut, we make sure that that's well documented and make sure that they have to have the shots. We do take care of the shots. The examination of the wreckage is when we go out there and we actually pull the cables. We do continuity checks on all the cables. We try to find everything that's visible that we can actually check from the accident investigation side to make sure that something didn't come loose. But normally when these airplanes, they crash, they're not always in big pieces just laying there. They're in tiny little broken up pieces, and most of the time they're burned. If they got fuel on board, they burn. So you got to be real careful when you do the examination. And usually we like to do it in pairs because one person can see something while the other person checks the other end of it. We always try to do it in twos. We don't break it up, the NTSB, the FAA, or Cessna, or whatever. We just whoever happens to be around. And the thing about it is that you are going to get dirty, and I do mean dirty. And so we always wear protective gloves, and we take care of ourselves. Pictures and diagrams. When you work an accident scene, from one minute to another, it always moves, it evolves. Sometimes the most precious things laying on the ground, you'll see it, and a few seconds later, it'll be gone. So Pictures are one of the most important things you can do. Diagrams, some guys still draw diagrams. Not me, I just use a GPS and hit the fix and just talk into a recorder and say what those fixes are, where those pieces are located. So the GPS and the technology has made it a lot easier. And that's one of the things that we do. The examination of the systems sometimes it gets a little harder. Examination of the hydraulic systems, sometimes the power plants. Anything that makes that airplane do whatever it's supposed to do is how we examine them. Where it's the vacuum pumps, where it's the fuel pumps. Sometimes we have to send those back to the NTSB in Washington, or we send them to the builder or the manufacturer of those particular parts, and then they will tear them down, and usually there's one NTSB person or one FAA person, or sometimes both, at the examination. There's a lot goes into, when you see an accident, there's a lot of things that happen after that. It's quite extensive. The examination of the structure. In most cases, the pictures I'll show you, when you say examination of the structure, you're going to say, well, what structure? In most cases, that's the way it really is. These airplanes just do not hit soft and lay there. So like the Cirrus airplanes, when an airplane of Cirrus hits and burns, all you see is the outline of the airplane there. And that is a very, very dangerous place to be, because all the carbon fiber, all the stuff that's floating around in the air, you can get it into your lungs. It can make you very, very sick. So these are the kind of things you got to be careful of. Not only like the Cirrus airplanes that have the ballistically open parachutes, you've got to be really careful, know what you're doing, or better yet, wait for somebody from the manufacturer to come in to help disassemble this stuff and safety it. Because that's the last thing we want to get somebody to launch to the moon, you know. We don't need to do that anymore. We look for the gear, flaps, and the spoilers of the airplanes. If they have flaps, we try to figure and mark where they are. Sometimes we can tell by the jack screw the number of threads in and out, what position of the flaps. Sometimes the flaps are still left in position that are there. Some airplanes that have the spoilers, we can tell, like the MU-2s that have spoilers, we can tell the position of the spoilers. A lot of airplanes that have hydraulic assisted flight controls, it's very, very difficult, because once the hydraulics go away, then those flight controls go back to a neutral position. Unfortunately, on the smaller airplanes, we do not have flight data recorders or cockpit voice recorders. Those are really, when we work big airplane accidents, we really rely on finding the CVR and the flight data recorder. That really tells the story. But again, that's a science within itself. The last thing is the removal and storage of the wreckage. This is for the litigation side of the world. Once we finish up this, the NTSB releases the accident site back to the owner of the airplane or the insurance company, and then they are responsible for removing it, taking it to a storage facility, and they put it into like a quarantine situation until the NTSB releases it. In some cases, the FAA can release them, but normally the NTSB does. As you can see, we work very closely together. This is a little accident I worked back in July the 4th of 2010. Down in Alpine, Texas, in West Texas, it was a Cessna 421, November 31 Alpha Sierra. It was a Part 135 air arms, a single pilot operation. There was 5 fatal. There was a pilot, 2 flight nurses, a young lady who had been at a dude ranch and she fell off the horse and was hurt pretty bad, and the passenger was her husband. He was sitting in the right front seat. It was on a really dark night down in West Texas. I do mean really, really dark. It was a VF operations. He had filed a VFR flight plan, and when he had taken off out of Alpine, he turned away from the city because they were doing the fireworks out there on July 4th. He turns away and goes into a black, dark hole. The pilot was 59 years old, ATP, 1,750 hours of total time, 145 hours in the 421. He wasn't a new guy, but he really wasn't highly experienced either. When you see the pictures of the accident, you're going to see how we can determine it was a high airspeed, low angle of attack impact, and I'll show you exactly how we figure that out. Like I said, I don't want to make you accident investigators, but you're going to see how we do this stuff. If you look, you can see the ground scarring and also the fuel where the airplane had burned all the way down through here. When I got there, we made this from a helicopter, one of the Department of Public Safety helicopters, and you can see the airplane laying right there. The town is right back over here. He only made it 1.3 nautical miles from the airport. Well, let's figure out what happened. This next picture, you can see the ground scars. You can see how it burned up. You can see what it looks like. That's what we have to work with initially. This is the airplane that came to invert. We know that the airplane, when it took off and came back around, he had high power settings, but he forgot the flaps were in the full down position. He forgot to retract the landing gear, and as he made his turn out of the downwind, he just kept descending, and he hit the top of this knoll perfectly wings level. You're going to see the ground scars. You see the left main, you see the right main, you see the nose gear. And then you can tell how the airplane gets up on one gear and the other one, how the right gear folds up under, and then you'll see how the airplane pitches up and rolls to the inverted and comes inverted. Now, in this particular case, you can see the propeller right there in front of the airplane. You see it right, if I can drive this thing over there. See the prop line up there? That's where it came to rest off the engine off this side right here. Now the airplane is totally inverted. Those folks in the back did not have a Chinaman's chance of getting out of there. No way. They were doomed. Again, that's what it looks like from the other side. And you can see how hard the wreckage is. If you walk up to it and say, okay, well, tell me what happened. Well, you can see from the pictures here, you can see this right there. That's the flaps. And these flaps are pure drag flaps. They have no lift capability whatsoever. They are pure drag. The 421 is a very powerful airplane. It was heavily loaded. And for whatever reason, where it was a fatigue issue, we know for a fact that it was not an airplane issue. It was just whatever the pilot did in that airplane on takeoff. He forgot to bring the flaps up. He should never have them down to start with. But the flaps were in a full down position. He took off, and then he brought the power back a little bit, and then the airplane just settled at a real high airspeed into the ground. That's a close-up of it. You can see how the flaps are up. You can see on this side, see that one up right there? Does that show up? Okay, you can see it up there on the top right-hand side. That was our first clue. But also the jack screws, we can tell by the number of threads showing. This is where Cessna, when they come in, they bring a chart out, and they'll say so many threads equals certain amount of flaps in percentage. That's how we do it. Unless it's a hydraulic system, and if the hydraulic bleeds, it's a by guess and by gosh kind of deal, unless we have an indicator that survived it inside. But in this case, you can see nothing survived on the inside. There was nothing that survived this intense fire. And it was a fully loaded airplane with a lot of gas. He was only going to go about 100 miles, but he had quite a bit of fuel on board the airplane. He was going into the town of Odessa, Texas, to Schleiermacher Field. That was the first one. The problem because of that was the pilot's inability to control the airplane. We found nothing wrong with the engines. We found nothing wrong with the airplane. We know that he took off, and the other thing, there was no CVR, no FDR, and there was no radar, because it was totally blanked out down in the mountains down there. There was no radar available to us to work off of. So this had to go back to the old way of doing accident investigation. The reason I was called out, because two things. It was a 421, and it was an air taxi operation, and it was a medical operation. So we have certain things that we key off of in Washington. Also, if somebody calls us from the White House and said, we want you to go look at it, we'd be fee right down there. But in this case, that wasn't the case. But we do anything that's a real high-profile accident, the GO team from the FAA side, we will launch at least one investigator. This particular accident is kind of a neat accident. This is off to Nuremberg, Germany. Well, what in the world am I doing in Nuremberg, Germany? Well, Nuremberg was one of the nicer places I've been to. Nuremberg is we went over there because it was a Gates Learjet, a Lear 35A, and it happened on February the 8th of 2000. He departed runway 10 in Nuremberg, and the reason he was up there in Nuremberg, he was having work done on his airplane. He had had the left engine worked on, and they had told him that that left engine had an issue. It needed to be taken off and overhauled. But the owner of the airplane said, no, bring it back to Roma in Italy. He wanted it brought back. He had his chief mechanic on the airplane. We had a young pilot in the left seat, a young pilot in the right seat. They both spoke two different languages, and I'll explain to you what happens here. This particular airplane had a flight data recorder and a cockpit voice recorder on it. That's the registration number. It's India. It's Mike Oscar Charlie Oscar. It was a non-commercial operation. It was a position flight back to its home base. There was the three fatal. There was a pilot, the first officer, and the chief mechanic. All three of them were from three different parts of the world. They all spoke three different languages. So when the captain said something, the first officer interpreted it, but he interpreted it kind of wrong. Or when the first officer said something, the captain or the mechanic interpreted it wrong. From the CVR, you can listen to how these people got confused with what they were trying to do. As the airplane departed, it departed on a beautiful clear day. He was on an IFR flight plane going to Rome, Italy. The maintenance was done on the airplane. The pilot elected not to do any more to it and elected to fly it out. He departed for a right downwind off of runway 10. And about 2/3 of the way down, the left engine just shut right down. Kaboom, it was gone. Shut down. Now, in a Learjet, for those who fly Lears, this is a no-brainer. This is absolutely a no-brain deal. You just pull the power back and put the gear and flaps out, line it up on the final and land it. I mean, this thing is just not an issue for single engine operations. But it turned out to be a big issue. It cost 3 people their lives. When the engine failed, the pilot was on the right downwind. He called for flaps 8. Flaps 8 were selected by the first officer. He called for the gear down. The airplane makes a turn to the right and continues a turn right on into the final. And onto the final, he calls flaps full. And then I've got something I'm going to show you in just a second. The pilot is flying the airplane. You see the power levers come back to flight idle because he's way high. You can see the VASI lights and the PAPI lights. They're all white on white. He is way high. So he says, oh, I got to get out. So he brings the power back to flight idle. As the power comes back, the nose comes up, the airspeed starts bleeding like crazy. VMC on this airplane, and VMC is defined as the minimum controllable airspeed which you can maintain directional control with the rudder. And there's a point in time when you reach that airspeed, the airplane just rolls over what we call the big dead bug. There's nothing you can do about it other than just pull the power back, take the power off it, put the nose back, re-accelerate it through VMC, and fly it back out. But in this case, you're going to see what happens. He brings the right engine back up to full power. When he does, the nose comes up. Then he calls for flaps 20. The first officer retracts the flaps to 20, then retracts the flaps on up, not meaning to. The airplane stalls and rolls over on its top in VMC, and over the top it goes into the ground. Now, going to Germany was kind of a treat. You know, we go over with the NTSB, we go over what we call an accredited rep. And this one was Hector Casanova. And Hector is a jewel of an NTSB person. I love traveling with Hector. And then we took some people with us from Gates Learjet. We took one of their demo pilots with us and one of their performance engineers. We need as much expertise, and these are the Garrett engines, so we had a Garrett engine person with us. This is what actually happens. That's a picture of the airplane laying in the woods. Now, this is not a bad place because we had a big, beautiful tent. It rained a little bit. It was nice. And then we got to go back to the hotel, and I had the finest chocolates I've ever had in my life. You know, everywhere you go, you always measure everything on what you eat. Is that not true? It is where I go. And I always like to say, where do the locals eat? Well, sometimes once you go there, you may not want to go back the second time, but in most cases, it's pretty neat. There's the Learjet laying on its side. If you look, there's a picture of the left side panel. You can see the airspeed, what airspeed it is. It's way below right at VMC. And that sometimes is a good indication of what we see in the airplanes. Not always do we have evidence like this. Sometimes the instruments are so destroyed, and also instruments are not always the most reliable thing to have an airplane to do an accident investigation. If you've got one, you always want to try to find something else that matches up, that gives you a better picture of what's going on. And we have taken the center parts of this, the flight director system, and I'll show you what we did with those. There's the picture of the left engine fan, the turbine, and you can see that there was basically no power on it whatsoever. In fact, there was no power on it. It was shut down, actually seized. This is the right side. You can see he had everything pushed up as far as it would go. So that was a good indication that the right one was running and the left one wasn't. Those are kind of one way of doing it. Now, that's how he hit. That's what we took out of the airplane. You can see he hit upside down. He hit about, I don't know, he came through the trees at about a 40-degree angle and rolling inverted as he came through the trees. And as it came through the trees, you could see the swath of the airplane rolling through the trees, how it cut the tree, the limbs as the wings came through the trees. You can see how the trees are cut as it gets lower and lower and lower down to it. That's a primary indication, and that's what it looks like right there. So we had 3 good indications of what happened. Plus, when we interviewed the people in the tower, they said, yeah, this is what we saw. So we had 2 really great witnesses from the tower. Now, we also had the radar to work off of, and we had the flight data recorder and the copy of voice recorder. The copy of voice recorder was, I got to tell you, was a lot of nonsense, because some of it you could understand, some of it you couldn't understand. They were talking over top of each other, and there was nobody really in command of the airplane. Even though the guy in the left seat, the captain, was in command of the airplane, when the first officer just yanked the flaps up, that put him into a world of hurt. Now, this is an animation that our office does. I'll explain to you what happens. There's things you need to look for. He has taken off of runway 10. He's on the right downwind going inbound. And once he gets downwind, I'll tell you where each part of the flaps go out to. You'll see the flaps come out, the gears coming down, and I'll tell you where all this takes place because the way our cockpit simulator is set up. But our guy does all this stuff from the flight data recorder. And you're going to see how the airplane was really flown. If you'll see, I hope you can see the numbers. Down here in the lower left-hand side, you see that area right there? That's the airspeed you need to work off of. Can you see that? Is it visible to see it down here? Can we turn the lights down just a little bit so we can see it maybe better? Or is that going to affect too many things? Because you need to be able to see what the airspeed does. This is the left engine, and this is the right engine for power. And right there is the altimeter. If you can see it, it'd be great. Because what happens is, let me figure out how to make this thing run here. It's pretty high-tech stuff here. There's a little bar that's supposed to come up that says play. Is he flying now? Okay. He's rolling to the downwind now, and he's continuing his turn. Right now, he's at flaps 8 and the gear down. You can see the power, the yellow, right there on the power. If I can find out where the little doom flunger is here. The power is on the yellow one, in the center one. There's the power. You can see it's coming down. See them dropping the power off now? If you look at the airspeed is getting really slow. I can't even read it up here. But anyway, he's getting slower and slower and slower. Now he's continuing his turn all the way through it. He doesn't square anything off. He doesn't do anything. Right here, he's called for full flaps. Can you see the runway up in front of you up there? See the white lights? Right up there is the lights to the runway. He just crossed the outer marker. Now, you see the power again right there? He's pulling the power way back. He's at full flaps in the gear, and look at the airspeed. He's dropping like crazy. See the airspeed dropping off? So he's thinking, if I can go farther by pulling the nose up and leaving the powers, I will glide farther. Well, that's about as far from the truth as you can possibly be. The airspeed is dropping off right now, and he's continuing right to the runway. And the motion you see is the actual herky-jerky motion of the airplane. Keep an eye on the power. See the power coming up? There comes the power back up. The gear's down. Now he's calling for flaps 20, right in this area. So the airplane is continuing right on in. And right now it's reading about 125 is what the airspeed reads right there. We know the magic number is around 117 or so. So as the airplane continues on, watch the power come up on the right side. There's the power coming up. See the nose trying to come back up to make him get to the runway. Yet he's really fairly high. He had the localizer tuned in. Now look at the airplane starting to roll. There comes the power in. The roll, 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 and then it's all over with. That's how quick it happens. This goes back to crew coordination. We talk about CRM in an airplane where you fly with with your husband and wife. Always good crew coordination should be there. You need to tell whoever's in the front of the airplane with you, talk it through. Also, if you're flying by yourself, talk it through. If something goes wrong, talk to yourself. Don't always have to answer yourself, but you have to talk to yourself to make sure you understand what you're doing and don't do anything that's going to put you in an adverse situation. Once the co-pilot yanked the flaps up, he put the airplane in a bad situation. From flaps full to flaps 20 to flaps 8, flaps 8 would have been where he should have left it. But they came all the way up, and when he did, it just took the lift off the wings of the airplane and put them in the ground. That was a very unfortunate accident. Of course, I flew a Lear for a long time. I flew November 2, which was a Learjet belonged to the FAA for 7.5 years. It was a 31A. You learn to fly respect when you fly Learjets. It's just not something you mess around with. Another thing we talk about is the places that we travel to. We have the weather, mountains, jungles, oceans, desert, extreme temperatures, and the wind. Well, I'm going to show you one of these places that I go to. This is off to Juneau, Alaska. Now, the reason I go to Juneau, Alaska, this happened to be it happened on July 30th of 2001. It was at Davis Glacier, 13 miles southwest of Haines, and we went into Juneau, Alaska. I spent the night there. We picked up a helicopter with the Army National Guard, and they took us out to the crash site. And nobody had been to the crash site because the weather was so bad. It was a sightseeing, it was a PA 32-300 Cherokee 6, November 39586. It was a Part 135 sightseeing operation. There was 6 fatal, the pilot and 5 foreign passengers. There was 5 Germans and 1 Canadian. And that was one of the big reasons we went up there, along with the Flight Standards Office from the Juneau office went up with me. It was a day VFR flight, and he flew into IMC conditions. Well, this goes back to a lot of things. This pilot said, I have to get these guys, there was a flight of 2 airplanes. So in his mind, he had to get his passengers to get the best view of this particular glacier. They were talking air to air to his buddy, and he said, I know a secret way through these mountains, and if you follow me on a heading of 240, I'll take you through the mountains. The guy above him says, I don't think so. Not today, anyway. So anyway, this guy breaks off and does a turn to heading of 240, and he smacked the mountain on the heading of 240. And it was a very interesting part of the world. This pilot was a commercial single-engine, 1,788 hours with 1,031 hours in the accident aircraft, in that Cherokee 6. And the cause of the accident, the contributing cause of the accident was flight into adverse weather conditions and the use of prohibited drugs. He had enough cocaine in him that he didn't even need an airplane. Plus, he had all kinds of depressants. He had had a major fight with his girlfriend the day before. I think his wife found out about that. I'm not exactly sure the real story behind it. But anyway, there was a lot of mitigating circumstances. You know, we get it. Whenever we mess up on an airplane and you crash one, we get right to the bottom of it. If we have to dig in people's, we go get them. We find out the real story. There's a trick into it. The way we got there was a Black Hawk helicopter took us up, put us in a high hover. We jumped out, and we went up there to the airplane. You can see the airplane laying over there, right there. See the airplane laying there? But you see where it slid off the side of this mountain? With us, we had a Alaska State Trooper. We had 2 high mountain rangers. We had a young man with us from the NTSB, myself, and 1 other person from the Juneau Flight Standards Office. This was an interesting deal. I sanitized all the pictures for you because this was really a mess. So I took the pictures and sanitized them for you. This is what the picture looks like. But if you look way up here to the high on the left, right up in this area, the airplane hit right dead center of that mountain. Just as square as you want to hit it, thump that mountain. The airplane literally stopped and slid down the mountain. It ejected 2 people out, and they're laying up there at the bottom of the rocks, and then the airplane slides back down. Well, I thought, well, this is going to be pretty easy. Being an old country boy, and I thought to myself, this is going to be a walk in the park. I have never been so tired in my life. Crawling up and down that mountain, and I said, man, if you could just get me out of here. So the helicopter, he couldn't land anywhere there, so he had to go and park up on a fairly high ridge. I think I've got a picture to show where the ridge was. And you know, I thought, man, how do you get up out of that helicopter? Well, I'll tell you a little story about how you get to that helicopter without killing yourself. But anyway, This is one of the high mountain rangers bringing one of the bodies down. Well, what actually happened was that these two guys go up there with two body bags. And we were standing down there next to the airplane, and the next thing I look up, here's this rooster tail of snow coming off this one guy hanging onto the bag. And I look up there, and he's screaming, help me, help me, help me. Well, I'd let go of the bag if it had been me. But he elected to hang on to it, and down through there, just a wall of smoke came down behind him. So we all got on either side of us. He went between us. We all jumped on the bag, and all of us missed the bag. We landed on the rope. And we all slid off. And I've got another picture to show you about a 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 foot drop. The next thing after the drop is the ocean. And I thought to myself, so the other guy, he comes down through there. He was really careful. And the next thing I hear him screaming, help me, help me, help me. And we're looking up, and here's this wall of snow coming off the back of him, just like a rooster tail. It's pretty neat. And you thought my job was fun. Well, there is the gentleman who was the pilot of the helicopter. You can see him way up there and waving at us. It was a Black Hawk. So we said, okay. So every time you do an accident, we always take the bodies and we stack them up like cordwood. Why we do this, I don't know. We do it to this day. We stack everybody up in stacks. And then we said, okay, we need to go back up to the helicopter. We're going to get in the helicopter, go back to Juneau, walk in the park, except for one little problem. So we start up the side of this mountain, and these two high mountain rangers, they run up through there. The state trooper, kind of fat and heavy like me, he kind of took the sideways angle. So this FAA guy said, hey, how do you do this? He says, well, you zigzag like this. After about 10 zigzags, I was a huffing and a puffing. I said, oh man, this is not good. And so I sat down on a rock and I said, look, I said, what happens if I fall off this in the fall? And I said, what do I do? He said, let me show you. So he sits down on his bottom and he says, you start sliding like this, and he said, you take your body like this and you turn it, you get up on your all fours and you just come to a stop, get up and crawl off there. Well, he said, let me show you how to do this. I said, no, that's really okay. He said, no, let me show you. So he hops over there, he sits down, and all of a sudden he starts sliding. And the next thing you know, he gets farther and farther, and he's trying to turn over, and guess what? He can't get up. And I thought, well, this is going to be not a pretty day for him, because that mountain was, off it goes. He manages to get up, and he's there just shaking. Well, I thought that's pretty good. I said, that's the way you do it. And he said, no, that's not the way you do it. But I learned that was not what I want to do. There's our proverbial Black Hawk. So we get up there. I get so sick, you can't believe it. I'm so dehydrated. I only went up there for like the 3-hour tour of Gilligan. Well, little did I know I was going to be up there for a day, or actually 2 days. So the helicopter, we got ready to get in the helicopter, and so went to hit the start button on the APU, and guess what? Nothing. Nada, nothing. So then they said, oh, we know we can hand crank it, we can pump it up and get the turbine spinning, and then we can fire the APU off. We huffed and we puffed, and guess what? It no start. And we said, what are we going to do? I said, okay. I asked the captain of the airplane, who was he was a full-bar colonel, lieutenant colonel. I said, Colonel, I said, go ahead and tell me what time the flight plan, so they'll start looking for us. He didn't follow VFR flight plan. I said, you got to be kidding me. I said, you have got to be kidding me. He said, no, I didn't follow flight plan. So we were sitting there and said, oh, look at all these cell phones we got. Do you know there's nobody with a gazillion miles to talk on a cell phone with? And it was getting dark. Well, it really wasn't getting dark because it was daylight all the time. But here come the bears. The bears started coming in, so we all piled into the helicopter. So we said, well, what are we going to do now? We had one gun that state trooper had with us. It was a 3. I said, there's 4 bears, 6 bullets. And it was 6 or 7 of us. So how do you want to do this? So the bears were up there scratching on the side of the helicopter. And I looked up there and I saw the E switch. I said, turn the ELT on. He said, no. I said, yeah, turn the ELT on now. So he turned it on, and another day later, here comes the helicopter up there picking us to pick us up. It turned out to be a good deal. We survived, but I learned a lot from that mission, that you always go prepared. Well, first of all, I didn't have any clothes other than what I had on. I didn't take a single bottle of water with me. I took nothing to eat because it was a 3-hour tour, Little from this day on, when you see my backpack, I'm ready to rock and roll. I can go anywhere with the best of them. And you know what? That's something that when you do this enough, you learn. That's yours truly, and there's the mountain right behind you. You can see it. That's back when I was good looking, young. That's my hero shot. But you can see how pretty it is behind there. And until you realize you're out there all by your lonesome and nobody is even thinking twice about you, this is really not good. I learned a long time ago about how to take care of Ishmael, moi, number one. And there wasn't a thing I could do about this situation because I relied on 5 other people. Off to Beitou, Mongolia. Anybody ever been to Mongolia? I would not recommend going there. That's not a garden spot that I go to. I don't think there's been ever an American in that part of the world because all the little kids that run up to us and grabbing our legs trying to speak English, to learn how to speak English and practice their English with us. It was really fun to go to it. But this was an organization. Well, the culture was kind of neat. The do's and the don'ts is one thing you learn when you go over there. But the food is really, you talk about Chinese food, Mongolia, never like I've had before in my life. And I don't even talk about that. This happened on November 21st of 2004. In Beitou, China, near Mongolia, Upper Mongolia. It was a Bombardier CRJ-200, belonged to China Eastern Union Airlines. It was a flight number MU5210. There was a serial number. That was the registration number, Bravo 3072. They were on their way to Shanghai. This crew had never had any operations to do with cold weather operations. They always flew in a southern climate. They had no idea about what was de-ice. I don't know. What's ice on the wings? Don't know that. What does it do to the wings? Don't know that either. Well, we get to find out. There was 53 fatal, 2 pilots, 4 flight attendants, 47 passengers, and 2 people on the ground got smacked. The aircraft was not de-iced, had overnight frost on it. It degraded the aerodynamic characteristics of the wing. For those who fly Challenger airplanes, this is something you've got to be aware of. There's even with bug matter or bird matter on top of the wings, degrades that wing so much. You need to make sure that airplane is really, really clean. Stalled on takeoff, the CVR and the FDR, we reviewed it right there. It crashed into a frozen lake at this park. This was an accident that when we got there, myself and a gentleman from the accredited rep from the NTSB went over, and just he and I went because this airplane was built in Canada. And the Canadians sent one person over. There's the airplane landing. They'd already gotten it out of this lake, and there it is laying there. You can see the gears down. Needless to say that everywhere we went, there's a picture of the airplane, what it looks like. You recognize that? When Bill and I walked out of the hotel, Bill said, "Do you see what I see?" I said, "Absolutely." So that is frost on top of a car. So we wrote 9:40 a.m. in there. So when we went back to the facilities, we were asking the people about frost, de-icing. Nobody, not anybody had a clue what we were talking about. Nobody. So we started asking them about de-ice procedures. They didn't know. But the young mechanic who did the walk around with the first officer said, "Oh no, I took my hand and rubbed the frost off the top of the wing." "Well, how much did you rub off?" "Oh, just a little bit on the front." "Did you rub the whole wing down?" "No." So it told us really quick, like, what caused this accident. I mean, this was not rocket science, but right there it was. We were under constant surveillance from the time we got there till the time we left. And that was one of the guys who basically stayed with me the whole time. He stayed about 2 arms length. And I know that our rooms were bugged. You know, my room was a huge room. It had a bed in it. Had some kind of a mat made out of something, and a little mattress. And when you opened the door, you couldn't get in because the bed was up there. So you had to step over, close the door, then step in, and then that's it. And I thought, wow, but it was okay. You just learn to live with it. And it was so cold, as you can tell. There's a picture. What I want to show you there, you see that little building there? It's kind of in the foreground right there. That building is a very telltale building. As we were walking by the NTSB gentleman was with me. I said, "Hey, Bill, look at this on the side here. What do you see there?" And he stops and he looks and he says, "My gosh." I don't know if you can see it or not from this picture, but on the left-hand side, there are wheel marks. I don't know if can you see the wheel mark right in there? Right there. See the wheel mark right there? That's from the left main landing gear. He went through perfectly 90 degrees. as he went through. This was in a recreational park, and it killed one of the persons that was on right there. There's the picture of the wheel. Can you see the mark on there now? That's what it looked like. So we knew the angle that it went through there was 90 degrees. And I made that picture, and I thought, well, you know, that's going to be precious because you just don't find evidence like that very often. One of the problems, there's a picture of the lake that it went into and the debris on it. But one of the things you run into in the world of translation, when you ask a question and they translate it and ask a question, it doesn't always mean the same, especially with the way I talk. I need my own translator, you know. I know that. It's okay to laugh about my accent. I'm proud of it. But anyway, when you ask a question, they would give you an answer thinking they were giving you the really correct answer. So it was I guess, oh my gosh, 50-50 chance of yes it was, no it wasn't. So we had to, but once we listened to the CVR, and you hear the captain advance the power, the first officer says power set, the next thing you hear is 80 knots, and you hear it says V1, rotate, very clearly in English. You hear the airplane come up, and the next thing you hear is a shaker, the shaker all the way through it. And then you hear the captain says, help me, help me, help me. By then the airplane was going through 90 degrees and off the side of the runway into that building, and then started disintegrating as it hit the building and into the lake it went. So the probable cause was not hard, but the FAA, the NTSB, we do not determine probable cause on a foreign accident. We determine if there's something we can help them with, and helping them with the FDR data is what we did. And we also helped them with the CVR. We actually did the translation, the English translation for them, because, you know, in Mongolia, they could download the CVR, the airline could, but we had to do the translation. You know, I want to thank you for your time. Does anybody have any questions? Any comments? Any concerns? Now, one more thing. I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you folks. This will be my last time. And I'm going to retire in December, 30 years and 6 months with the FAA, so it's good for me. You know, I've been looking at my flying career. My flying career is going to end in December also. That's going to be it. I just want to thank you. I'll be back as a visitor. I appreciate everything for you.
Tony, what a great presentation. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Enjoy. Thank you, folks. And if you'd go out that door, out to the right, and